Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Arit Connor.
Good morning, Cayman. I'm Donna Bush in this morning on For the Record for Mr. Orit O.C. Connor, who, as you know, at this point is off today. But we're hoping that everybody will tune in this morning. Give us your calls. You can call us at 1-800-534-8255. That's toll free, courtesy of Lime, or you can give us a call as well at 949-8037. We'd like to mention off the top that For the Record is brought to you by Champion House Restaurant 2 and Champion House Cafe, as well as the Auto Spa on Godfrey Nixon Way. As Susan mentioned earlier, we'll be having the Honorable Premier, Mr. Alden McLaughlin, in studio with us this morning. But before that, I'd like to take a few minutes just to go through some of the headlines in the Cayman Compass this morning. The first headline is Health City Cineco Seek Deal. If you haven't had a moment to read that story by Brent Fuller as yet, basically it says the Cayman Islands government is considering a formal contractual agreement made between its insurance company, its public hospital system, that's the Cayman Islands Hospital, and Health City Cayman Islands for the referral of government hospital patients. Now, there seems to be some unresolved issues leaving that whole deal in limbo at this point. Just a quote from Cineco Chief Executive Lonnie Tibbetts on the matter. He says, on behalf of the insurance company's Risk and Appeals Committee, this was in an email to Minister Marco Archer, who's responsible. He says, as you may recall, one of the pledges of Health City was to not interfere with the existing services provided by local physicians' facilities, including the Cayman Islands Health Services Authority. He says, as such, we all share the common understanding that Health City would be used exclusively for tertiary services and or secondary specialty services not previously provided locally. Just to point out that those services included pulmonary treatments, as well as pediatric endocrinology and orthopedics, among others. The email does continue on with some quotes from the Cayman Islands local partner, Mr. Gene Thompson. We can cover that later on. The other story on the Cayman Compass headline front page this morning, sad news as the third fatal motorcycle accident happened on our roads, which took the life of 23-year-old Sion Brown. You may recall there were two other young men whose lives were taken as a result of motorcycle accidents on our roads earlier this year, one being Dan Grant at 21, and the other being Eric Bush, 28, who died 2 days after his crash. Really, really sad day for the family and, of course, friends of Sion Brown and the other two young men, who I would think would still be mourning for their loss. Of course, our prayers go out to all of them this morning and, of course, going forward. But again, very, very sad day for the Cayman Islands as far as road accidents are concerned. Looking through the rest of the newspaper, Minister Tara Rivers promises action on minimum wage. Just yesterday, CIGTV aired a press conference along with Radio Cayman as well later in the day, as Mr. Lemuel Hurlston and Mr. Nicholas Joseph, both members of the Minimum Wage Advisory Committee, were on air with Minister Rivers and some of her staff from the Ministry of Education, Employment, and Gender Affairs, discussing minimum wage, which has been a very controversial issue here in the Cayman Islands. But Minister Rivers has clearly spoken, and she says a legally mandated minimum wage for workers in the Cayman Islands will be brought to the Legislative Assembly before the next general elections at the latest. It's always been an action of hers from the time she was running for politics last year in 2013, and she continues on that path of, getting a minimum wage here in the Cayman Islands. As you all, the listeners out there and our viewers will know, the dynamics of the Cayman workforce are very different than many places, so you can appreciate and understand why this is not a simple turnover or a simple fix. Another headline on page 6 says, minor earthquake near Cayman. We just happen to be on tectonic plates, if you don't know. that are always active, and sometimes we feel these earthquakes, other times we don't. But this one in particular was a 4.6 magnitude earthquake, which occurred about 91 miles southwest of Grand Cayman on Thursday morning. Again, a minor earthquake near Grand Cayman. Some great news as the Proud of Them another Proud of Them recipient is featured in the Cayman Compass. That's pilot Hakeem Bush. He is the latest honoree in the Proud of Them initiative that was started about 2 years ago. It highlights the great works and achievements, accomplishments of many of our young Caymanian men and women. On page 9 in the Cayman Compass, government backs daylight savings. If you're not sure, you haven't heard about that yet, that is a fact. They say that daylight savings, of course, is something that is a system that's used in several Caribbean countries and the region, namely Mexico, Cuba, Haiti, the Bahamas, and Turks and Caicos, and it's said to benefit many aspects of life, one being that, Cayman's financial services industry will be on time with the rest of the world. However, government has clearly said that they are not backing Sunday trading, as in opening it up to all businesses to open on Sundays. Rather, they are going to make it legal for those businesses, the mom and pop shops or the corner shops, as some of us may call them, make it legal for those businesses to operate, because as it stands, most of them have been grandfathered in, but they're not operating legally at this point. Over on page 10, if you didn't know, the flu vaccine is available. Health officials are recommending residents get the seasonal flu vaccine before this year's flu season peaks. I can speak to this personally. I had never had a flu shot, was always, saying to myself, who needs a flu shot? Well, last year I had a flu shot, and I have to tell you, viewers and listeners, it worked. I haven't had a flu in a year. There were a couple of times when I felt like I was going to get a flu, but it just didn't happen. So I would certainly recommend anyone to go out and have a flu shot or get the flu shot. The free shots are available by walk-in from 2 to 4 p.m. That's Monday to Friday, starting October 20th. At the Cayman Islands Hospital and District Health Centers, as well as the Faith Hospital in Cayman Brac, and by appointment at the Little Cayman Clinic. Again, the flu vaccine, as I just said, is available. It is free, so you should be able to go and have your flu shot there with you. Just a reminder again that For the Record is brought to you by Champion House Restaurant 2 and Champion House Cafe, as well as the Auto Spa. Our phone lines are open if you want to give us a call with your comments or your questions. The toll-free number again is 1-800-534-8255, all courtesy of Lime, or you can give us a call as well at 949-8037. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we have our Honorable Premier, Mr. Alden McLaughlin, joining us. Please stay with us. For the Record, we'll be right back. All right, and good morning again, Cayman. I'm Donna Bush in for Mr. Orit O.C. Connor, who is off, obviously. It's good to be here this morning, and I hope that you're tuning in and listening. I have the pleasure this morning of having our Honorable Premier, the Mr. Alden McLaughlin, in the studio with us this morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning. Glad to be here again. First time with you.
It's a pleasure to have you here, as always, and to talk to you. Recently, you were the keynote speaker at the annual Chamber Legislative Luncheon, Premier McLaughlin, and you were able to present the state of the nation as it relates to 2014, and it's a very detailed document. But let's start from the top, and again, our callers can give us a call and ask you to go more in depth, or if they have any questions as well. So you started out talking about the budget. Can you lay some of those details out for us as to how it relates to where we are as far as expenditure, surplus, so on and so forth?
Thank you, Donna. Well, the story was very good news, really. The budget is performing very well as against our projections, predictions, both in terms of containment of expenditure, but also in terms of revenue. And I think the country is in a very good position. Obviously, that's just the first quarter of this year, but the indications are very good. Uh, of course, there are always concerns and issues about the impact of what's happening in the rest of the world. And of course, one of the concerns now is the impact of the Ebola virus and what that may do to to the world markets and so forth. And we've been seeing some volatility in the stock exchanges over the course of this week in particular. So I say all of that to say is that while the news is very good, obviously Cayman is a small place and heavily impacted by what happens elsewhere, in particular what happens in the United States. Right. So we've had a GDP growth of 1.5% in the first quarter and 3.3% in the second quarter of the year. So as I said, all indications are very good, but there are concerns that the government has about what's happening in the rest of the world. We can manage our affairs here as best we possibly can, but we've also got to bear in mind what happens elsewhere.
Right. Well, certainly it's a huge feat. As you mentioned, Minister of Finance, the Honorable Marco Archer, had done such a wonderful job with the budget and with projections and particularly with the surplus. What would you say this is a testament to, though, the numbers that we show pre-Ebola?
Yeah. Well, I think the reality is that the world economy has rebounded significantly, in the U.S. in particular, and that has, as I said, has a huge impact on things here. But I believe that Cayman has settled down. A lot of the concerns that were around in the last few years have pretty much gone away, and people view what's happening in Cayman as the reflection of a solid, stable government. And I think that has had a real impact on people's willingness to invest and spend money.
Right.
And operating revenues for the first quarter were 117.6 million, which is about 2.5 million better than we had projected, and our operating expenditures were 119.1 million in the first quarter, which were 5.5 million less than we had planned to spend. So as I say, we're containing it on both ends. We paid down another $25.5 million in the public debt. The government-owned companies and statutory authorities are also doing well, performing about $1 million better than projections. So, and the government is not planning to borrow any money in the course of this fiscal year. So things, as I say, are looking quite good.
Right.
But I say that not to really boast or not to become overconfident, because as I said, Cayman is subject to shocks in what happens in the global economy, and the Ebola thing is a real worry and concern now, not just from the health standpoint, which is a huge issue, and but also its impact on the economy.
Yeah.
Or economies of the world.
Exactly. Speaking of Ebola, and this is something that we may not be able to comment on any further, but I don't know if you're aware, but there was a message going around on social media saying that there were a couple of people who had actually flown into Jamaica as visitors from Liberia in particular, and you never know if these things are true or not, who may have Ebola. Again, it's one of those things that's out there, but
Yeah, the thing is, there's some people seem to derive a great deal of satisfaction from creating panic and concern, and what I've been led to believe is that this is a hoax, or these were hoaxes.
Right.
But it does create a great deal of concern. Our government is working very hard at preparations, and while not much has been said in terms of public statements so far, I can assure everyone that the government is working diligently at this. We're actually seeking assistance from the United Kingdom, both with respect to expertise, but also the other resources that are going to be necessary. We're having a major presentation made to the cabinet and the caucus on Tuesday morning, so that everybody in the government is fully aware where we stand with respect to this. Right. And then we'll be taking some more policy decisions about what we do. I can already see that we are going to have to find more resources in terms of MONEY to be able to gear up properly to ensure that Cayman is safe and able to deal with these issues. I mean, we are so close to the United States. We have so much contact with the United States. We have direct flights into Dallas, where cases have been found. So while we're working hard to protect the borders, in other words, to try to intervene before an individual who is displaying symptoms actually gets here, we have to make preparation. We have to be ready to deal with the situation if somebody does come through. And then, of course, there's the issue of all of those who were on the flight with the individual, as happened in the U.S. Over the course of this week. So I mean, those are realities. I'm not seeking to create fear, but to let people understand that the government is fully aware that we are vulnerable. That our business is Cayman. Cayman relies heavily on tourism, and we have significant number of flights in here every day. Plus, we have the cruise ships. So there are many avenues by which persons who are infected could arrive in Cayman. So we've got to do the contingency planning and gear ourselves up to be able to deal with it. What I expect is that following the briefing to cabinet on Tuesday, that the health minister will be making a fairly comprehensive statement about our state of readiness and what we're doing going forward.
Okay, well, Premier McLaughlin, like myself, I'm sure that our listeners out there are happy this morning to hear that government is doing what they have to do.
We're not hiding our head in the sand and saying, well, there's nothing that we can do. We're very conscious of, how vulnerable we are because of the nature of the industries that we have, and that the impact of even one case in Cayman and what that could do to the tourism industry and everything else in terms of people's sense of safety. So this is not the United States. This is not Dallas, where it's a huge place. And yes, these are isolated incidents, and the people are over here, and so the rest of the state, the city, can carry on as normal.
Right.
Cayman is a very small place, so.
Yeah, we can't take it lightly. Going back to the State of the Nation, report or speech that you gave at the recent annual Chamber Legislative Luncheon, let's move on to the subject of unemployment. In your speech, you said, while we're being good stewards at the country's finances, we're fighting hard against the phenomenon of jobless growth, particularly as it relates to Caymanians.
Right.
Let's talk about that. It's close to the heart of many Caymanians, young and old, as well as many people who have lived here for very long periods of time. I believe that the listening public acknowledges the fact that, of course, we're a society that needs people from other parts of the world to be a part of our society, because we just don't make up the numbers enough to support the job market. But let's talk about this 37 and again, our callers can give us a call on our toll-free number, as well as number the other 949-8037 number with their comments or questions. But let's talk about your speech and what you had to say as it relates to unemployment.
Right. As I said, all of the economic indicators are good and strong. That the economy is in the growth mode again, and the government's revenue is doing well. The GDP is improving, but lagging behind all of that is employment. But that's not an unusual phenomenon. The same thing happened in the U.S. Because what happens is, for a while, employers just keep their numbers in terms of employees where they were, and say, how long can we hang on with the numbers that we were at, while we experience an improvement in earnings. Let's hang it there. And then, of course, people aren't terribly confident because we've been through a really rough patch over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. Should I go take on more staff now?
Right.
Is this temporary, or is this going to be sustained growth that sort of thing. So those kinds of things operate on the minds of management, and so employment tends to lag behind the actual economic growth for a while. But we add to that the sort of unique situation of Cayman, where we, despite all of that, we've got more than 20,000 work permits, but we still have a significant number of Caymanians unemployed. I can tell you, it is not the 2,000, 3,000 people that I hear um, banded about on other talk shows. If we had 2,000 or 3,000 Caymanians unemployed, I promise you there'd be demonstrations outside the government administration building, or all sorts of other things would be happening. The numbers are not that high, but they are still a significant number of unemployed Caymanians. And the NWDA has been working hard. A lot of people think the NWDA is simply an employment agency to go out and find jobs for people, but that really is not even its principal function. It's the National Workforce Development Agency. It's about preparing people to be able, so that they're better able to get jobs in the first place, in terms of resume writing and interviewing skills and deportment and that sort of stuff. But probably more importantly, that they're able to hold on to the jobs once they do get them. So the NWDA has been off to a rocket start. It was something that was developed under the previous administration. We think it's a great idea, and we've tried to take it forward, but it really has had huge teething problems. There is now in place a professional director. We hope, there's been some controversy about his hiring as well, because he's a non-Caymanian, which might seem a bit ironic. But the reality is, and I've checked on this, although we don't get to make the decisions as the elected government about who gets hired, I've satisfied myself that they went through the proper hiring process. They advertised it. I have no doubt that there are Caymanians here who could do that job, but the reality is they didn't apply. And I think with part of it has to do because the NWDA is such a whipping boy for everything that goes wrong or doesn't happen with respect to employment. But I believe it does have a good chance now of being able to make an even better impact and impression on the whole employment situation in Cayman. But I also addressed in the speech, the concerns which the government really has about what we see as a growing practice of some companies declaring posts that are held by Caymanians as redundant, and then in very short order going out, retitling those positions and going out and advertising the job again and trying to get work permits for the individual. That is a matter of great concern to the government. There are a couple of companies in particular that we believe are headed down that road, and we've spoken to, I know one of them at some length, even at the ministerial level, but we've also urging the boards to be very careful and thoughtful when applications for work permits come in from these kind of companies where that they've just gone through a period of declaring jobs redundant, and then you get a slew of applications for new work permits. And so I was urging the chamber, which is the representative, the biggest representative of companies, of employers in Cayman, to do their part with respect to urging their members to be good employers, to give Caymanians a chance to do what the law and good sense is, which is to give them preference with respect to jobs. We'll never this has been an issue ever since the only way I can say it, as long as I can recall, there's always been this tension about whether or not Caymanians are getting a fair shake in the job market, and whether this job could be held by a Caymanian, but instead is held by somebody on a work permit. We need people here on work permits. We need the numbers as well of people here to make this economy and this country viable. So I don't want anyone to interpret anything I'm saying as being anti-expat or anything like that. It's not the case at all. But the Caymanian people must have a fair chance at getting and holding on to a job, must have a fair chance at upward mobility in the workplace. If not, the tensions which do exist will only get worse over time, and Cayman will not be the attractive, peaceful, tranquil place that all of us love and want to preserve. And so there has to be this balance. There has to be a real effort by employers to give Caymanians a fair shake at the job. If they require more training, train them. If they need more experience, let them get it.
Right.
But give them a chance at the job.
Uh, in your speech, you also mentioned that the NWDA has found employment for 179 people. Now, a lot of people out there may say, "Oh, well, that's really
It's not
not
a
a
big
huge
number,
number,"
yeah.
But it is in the scheme of things. When you speak of realistically, the numbers of unemployed is not up in the thousands,
Right.
as everyone has talked about on the streets. And I mean, if you walk into certain places like the supermarkets, you're going to see more Caymanian faces these days. There are a lot of businesses that are actually employing Caymanians. There's no quick fix for this. There's no quick solution for this issue. And I hope that listeners and viewers out there will agree with us on that.
Right. And the thing is, when the economy is moving at full tilt, there are less of these issues, because once you get development moving, especially construction and that sort of stuff, it directly and indirectly provides great opportunities for employment for Caymanians, and so you get less and less of it. But you still have, even when things are moving at full tilt, you still have these issues, these tensions that I spoke about, as to whether Caymanians are still getting the opportunities for upward mobility and so forth. And so there's no magic solution. We're not going to reach a point. I wish I could say we would, where everything is hunky dory and nobody's complaining.
Right.
I mean, that just do exist.
It doesn't happen.
That just do exist.
Right. Just listening to the general public though, and getting feedback, that I've heard from some people, there are always going to be good stories and bad stories, like you said. It's just that as a people, we're not very vocal. And we tend to be very diplomatic. Our demeanors are very, calm.
I think that's changing. Though. You listen to the talk shows. People speak out a lot more now than they did 10 years ago.
They're very riled up. All right. Well, we're going to take a break now and go to our news with Susan Watson. Hello again, Cayman. I'm Donna Bush in for Mr. Orit Connor on For the Record this morning. Just a reminder that For the Record is brought to you by Champion House Restaurant 2 and Champion House Cafe, as well as the Auto Spa on Godfrey Nixon Way. With us in our studio this morning, the Honorable Premier, Mr. Alden McLaughlin, and he's talking to us about his keynote speech, State of the Nation speech, recently at the Chamber of Commerce Annual Legislative luncheon. Again, you can give us a call with your comments and questions. The toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255, courtesy of Lime, or you can call us as well on 949-8037. Again, welcome to the studio this morning here on For the Record, Premier McLaughlin. Let's talk about development. Lots happening in that area. A lot of good things moving forward, many long-term projects that's going to help the unemployment rate here in the Cayman Islands. There's an east-west arterial extension that's going to be happening that will provide access to a project in the Eastern District. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, the Ironwood project, because that's what they're calling it, is a really exciting prospect for Cayman, because it's essentially a golfing community development, which is anchored by, or to be anchored by Arnold Palmer, legendary golfer, and that's a huge project that is going to last about 20 years. The first component of it really is the extension of the east-west arterial from Newlands up to Frank Sound, which is about a 10-mile stretch, and we were hopeful that would start. Construction on that would start as early as next month. I'm not sure they're actually going to make next month, but we're very, very close to being able to deal with it now. And one of the sort of innovative things that we've had to do is, because of government's constraints with respect to borrowing money, and because we really don't want to build on government debt and to have to find the revenue to pay back from current revenue streams, what we've been working with the developer and with the FCO to do is to devise a financial structure which would allow us to get the road, government pay for it, without having to ask taxpayers now for more money to do so. So and that's what's taking some of the time to work out all of the details of that. But essentially, the concessions, the import duties and land transfer stamp duty on sales of the land in that area, in that development, will go to pay the cost of the road. The developers actually obtaining the financing themselves, and so at the moment, I think we're looking at somewhere around $40 million for that stretch of road, but it'll be paid back. They'll get the financing. It'll be paid back from the stamp duty and the import duties and so forth that would be charged on the project. So when that gets started, that's probably about 18-month build out. It'll require a tremendous amount of aggregate, tremendous amount of work. It'll be a real boon to the economy once that gets started. And the project itself is going to take about 20 years to build out, because it's a huge golfing community. Not just the homes and condominiums and so forth, but essentially a town center as well.
Right, some 600 acres, includes a hotel, conference center.
Yes, so it's really an exciting project once it gets started. We're at that point now where, everybody is anxious, and certainly the government is anxious too. We've got a number of projects, both government and private sector, that are just about to start but haven't actually started. And until they actually start, they don't have the positive economic impact that we need them to have. And so we are all pushing and shoving and doing everything we can to get some of these projects actually moving. But I have no doubt that by this time next year, in terms of development, the economy is really going to be motoring along.
Well, certainly the East-West Arterial Corridor will be a great extension, as it relates to traffic flowing from the east to the west. So I'm sure that, listeners out there will be happy when that gets underway. Also, there's the Kimpton Hotel. Kimpton, that's on West Bay Road, the DART project. That seems to be going along very well.
Yeah, that's going along very well. They're projecting that they should be able to open, I think, towards the end of 2016. So that's a major long-term construction project as well, which is having a huge positive impact on the economy. And the DART group are also proposing another hotel, which will be essentially across from Cayman Bay,
right,
on the old Coral Cayman West Indian Club property. They did a presentation to caucus. Trying to remember, it was last week Monday, I think. And it really exciting. What they are projecting is that they will start construction on that in 2016, just about the time that they're finishing construction on the other one. So I think that's a very good thing, so that you don't have the two major things going at once, but as soon as while one is winding down, the other one is winding up.
Right.
And that'll take us, in terms of construction, into another couple of years again of major construction there. It's very exciting. It's going to mean new roads. It's going to mean some major changes to how we get from Georgetown to West Bay.
Right.
But it's all good. It's all good. So
right. So for people who don't know exactly where you're talking about, on West Bay Road is right next to the Royal Palms, between Royal Palms and the West Indian Club. Also, the old Hyatt, that was destroyed, as many things were, by Hurricane Ivan. I think people out there will be happy to hear that that's being revived. Do you care to touch on that?
Yeah, plans have been submitted to create a new 224-room resort and conference center on what was the old Hyatt site. And in addition to that, they've now made a separate application to add 2 new stories and additional penthouse suites to the original plans. And once that gets started, again, we're looking at probably a 2-year project. And the plan would be that would open sometime in 2017. So as I said, I think I'm pretty certain that by absent some intervening event, by this time next year, in terms of construction, things should really be moving along.
Right. And I'm sure that a lot of people out there are happy to hear that. There's so many fond memories, I believe, that Caymanians have of the old Hyatt property. Also, government, in your speech, you said that government is working with a Caymanian developer to help him realize his dream of developing the Grand Palazzo.
Yeah, the Grand Palazzo. Yeah.
Palazzo. Yeah. Any details on that?
Yes, that the plans for that are that is the site for that is down by, I think it's called, whether are we still calling it the Grand Cayman? You know,
It's Holiday Inn now, but
yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
right.
same.
But the Grand Cayman was
Yeah.
down in that area, near Crystal Harbor and so forth. And that's another very exciting, but that's a condominium, a major sort of upscale condominium project,
Okay.
and really would be the first one of those on the north sound side of the West Bay Road. So there were some objections by people in the area, and the developer is working through those.
Okay.
I'd call his name, but he'd probably be unhappy if I did that.
Okay.
I think he wants to wait until he's resolved all of those issues and can make a grand announcement that the project is actually proceeding. But
Okay.
the plans were submitted to planning some time ago, and now they're working through that process. We're dealing with the objections of neighbors, and but he's very confident that they're going to be able to resolve them, and that in the end, everyone in the area will view this as a major improvement to the area and not something to be concerned about.
Right. Moving east to the Beach Bay area, some major developments. For that area, there's actually a hotel development that's planned for Beach Bay that's going to actually involve additional road areas for residents
Yeah.
coming from the east.
Yeah, we've been dealing with the developers of a major hotel again in Beach Bay ever since we took office. I think the idea was around before, well before we took office this time, and going through negotiations with respect to concessions, because everybody wants concessions to be able to go ahead now, and so we've been working through those. I think we're almost there at a point where both government and the developer will be content that that we're getting a fair deal. Because what my administration is not going to do is to give away the country or just to get a project moving. But as I've explained to a number of developers, said, listen, the key to the concessions is this: you got to do it now, because don't come to us asking for concessions when the economy is motoring along and there's development everywhere and we've got lots and lots of projects going.
Right.
What we want, and the reason we give you concessions, is we want the development to start now at a time when Cayman really needs the additional economic activity. You got 4 or 5 major projects going. Don't come asking for concessions then.
Well, speaking of major projects, let's move on to what the government is tackling as it relates to development. One being cruise port development. Where do we stand on that?
Well, I think we're making really good progress with respect to that. The key to that project, really, from our perspective, and I think this is perhaps where we differ from the last administration, is we understand that we have got to ensure that those who are going to utilize the port have a real stake in it. The Cayman Islands cannot afford to spend, even if we could find the money, 180, $200 million on a cruise port without a guarantee that the cruise ships are going to call in sufficient number to actually make it viable. And so that's why what we're aiming for is a public-private partnership with the cruise industry, which locks them into the deal so that they have a vested interest in bringing their passengers here for 20 or 25 years more to pay for the port. And so that's where we're going with this at the moment. So those negotiations are going on while we're still having the environmental impact assessment carried out, because I think really that's what we have to be sure of, what the impact of these huge piers is going to be on the environment, particularly on the the sensitive and and it's a very special 7 Mile Beach area. So once we have that report and we can assure ourselves and the country that this is not going to be deleterious in terms of environmental impact, I believe we'll be able to press ahead. But I still don't see construction on the pier starting before 2016.
Okay.
It's just too complex a project for it to progress much faster than that.
Right. You mentioned a private public partnership as it relates, I would believe, to the Florida Cruise Association, the FCCA.
Actually, it would be with probably a couple of the cruise companies,
Okay.
not the association itself.
Okay. Well, how receptive are they, or how receptive have they been to that idea?
Very receptive, and I think increasingly so. The Deputy Premier and Minister of Tourism was at a conference in St. Martin last week, and he had the opportunity to sit down and talk with them again, and he's come back very, very optimistic and quite excited. There's been so many hitches, so much hemming and hawing and starting and stopping, that I think people, the key people in the cruise industry have been questioning whether Cayman really had the commitment to do this. I think they're satisfied that this government does and that we are going to proceed.
Okay. So the other big project, and this one seems to be moving forward quite rapidly, is the. Actually, we're going to take a break, and okay, we're going to take a call. There's a caller on the line. Thank you for calling. For the record, do you have a question or comment for our Honorable Premier this morning?
Good morning, good morning, good morning to you, Donna, and good morning, Mr. Premier.
Good morning.
Good morning,
I
ma'am.
won't keep you long. Thank you very much. Just to say that, your State of the Nation address, I think it is, and all the information contained therein, it's, there's so much of it that's positive. In fact, I guess you would say it's just an overall positive address to the nation. And what I was hoping is that since, not everyone might have been intoned on last Thursday when it was announced. I'm wondering whether or not, there are going to be great efforts to ensure that this is repeated over and over again. I'm sure this is something that should be left with the PR people there of the government, but certainly it is worth being repeated, or people need to know what's happening, what the government has been doing, particularly over the last 16 months, and moving forward, what the very positive outlook is. So it would be, I think, an extremely good idea to ensure that this is not just something that's heard once or twice or three times, whether it's by television, radio, or maybe in a series of say in the newspaper. It might be too long for printing, say, in just one issue, but I think it should be a series of in the newspaper where the Caymanian people are fully aware of what's happening, and because we just need the good news. And I have taken into consideration what you said about what's happening around the world, but as of now, this is what this is what exists in Cayman, and so I'm hoping that this is something that's going to be widely disseminated to the general public.
Well,
and thank you very much, and congratulations for all the good things that's happening within the government. And I pray God to bless you, give you continued. I'm sure He will. He said, "You ask Him, He'll give you wisdom," and you need a lot of it now. So that was mainly what I wanted to express.
Well, thank you, Ms. Daphne. If I had the power, I would appoint you to the editorial board of the Compass. But you see, they don't like to publish good news, so they've buried every point that I made in the speech on the fourth or fifth pages of the Compass, preferring to put the bad news on on the front. But that's the way it is. That's the way it is in
Anyway,
Cayman.
use every other media outlet you can get.
Miss Daphne, thank you so much for your call. And just further to what our premier has had to say, I can speak on behalf of CIG TV, which is the Cayman Islands government television channel, that starting tonight we will be running the entire speech, State of the Nation, at the Chamber Luncheon by the Premier on CIG TV. And as you know, we run it a lot. So you can look for that over the next week or two as we ensure that as many people as possible can listen at various points and can hear exactly
Right.
what he
And
said.
I'm sure that Radio Cayman will ensure that they do as much as possible. No, it's very, very important that our
Yes.
people know what's going on.
Absolutely. We couldn't
God
agree
bless.
with you
Have a
more.
good day.
You too, Miss
Thank you
Miss
very much.
Daphne. You too.
And nice job, Donna. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. So we were continuing our conversation here on For the Record with our Honorable Premier, Mr. Alden McLaughlin. We were talking about development right before the caller. We're going to continue talking about the project that government is now moving forward. Actually, we're going to take a break and we'll be right back with more For the Record. Stay with us. Donna Bush, if you're just joining us, I'm in for Mr. Orrit Connor today. We have the pleasure of having our Honorable Premier, Mr. Alden McLaughlin, in the studio today to dissect and go through his recent State of the Nation speech at the annual legislative luncheon held by the Chamber of Commerce. Again, you can join us by phone. Toll-free call is 1-800-534-8255, courtesy of Lime, or 949 8037. We do have a caller on the air. Caller, thank you for tuning in to For the Record. What is your question or comment, please?
Yes, good morning, Donna.
Good morning.
Good morning to our Honorable Premier.
Good morning, ma'am.
I am enjoying your State of the Nation speech, and unfortunately I didn't hear it at the luncheon because I wasn't there, but I am enjoying that. But my question is Ebola. And it's two questions. I did read on social media where all of the Caribbean nations from the Eastern Caribbean are going to Cuba on a conference, but I didn't see Cayman Islands there. They're going there on some type of conference to prepare and get themselves ready for being able to tackle and get rid of for the event of the disaster coming into the Caribbean. Then I also seen where Jamaica, and this was not a hoax, it was where Jamaica Premier and the Minister of Health did have an address on a couple that had visited Jamaica, where one had traveled somewhere in the African nations that had traveled there. There were a couple, but one had traveled there and the other hadn't. But when that was discovered, they immediately quarantined that individual. But what they did, check them out, and then they did send a couple back out of the country into Montego Bay side. Mm-hmm. Now, I also read on social media where we have had from our country here a delegation that's gone to Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. Now, I don't know if this is true. They've gone to Cameroon. I know that Cameroon is somewhere up in that area of close into the African side. If this is true, why would they have gone at this time? Even though it's the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association could not have been delayed at this time, canceled, or and have a good reason, because this is scary, because people travel all over the world, and somebody could be on a flight coming from the same countries where it is definitely exemptions saying you shouldn't be traveling from these places. What are the alternatives of them when they come back into the country, if they have really gone? What are we going to do about that?
Ms. Lana, thank you so much for that question. I guess the question and our premier touched on this earlier. How prepared are we? Are we preparing for Ebola? And I think he reassured the public earlier. Maybe you weren't tuned in at the time, Ms. Lana, but he can certainly reiterate that for us.
Yeah, well,
Okay, thank you.
I don't know. I don't know if Cayman is sending a delegation to Cuba. The Minister of Health would know that. I'm not aware. As I said, we're having a full briefing on Tuesday morning, and then I'll be fully up to speed with exactly where we are in terms of preparations and what other steps we are taking. But in relation to the travel, so the speaker and a delegation went to Cameroon to the CPA meeting. Cameroon is not one of the countries that in which Ebola has surfaced.
Right.
Of course, there are risks. If you go to Dallas, they're just looking at a place that is recently turned up.
Mm-hmm.
We have direct flights into Dallas, so there are risks inherent in travel, and there are risks inherent in living these days because the world is just so interconnected, and people travel all over the world. So I guess the speaker and her delegation must have assessed those risks when they went. They're back, and I hope and pray, and I haven't heard anything otherwise, that they're anything but fine.
Mm-hmm.
The whole world can't grind to a halt because if we are so paralyzed, with fear that we can't do anything, I'm not sure how any of us will survive.
Right.
You just got to assess the risks and take as many measures as you possibly can to ensure that or to try to ensure that you don't expose yourself unnecessarily. But you can't just stop.
You have to be able to function.
We can't just draw some kind of safety curtain over the Cayman Islands and say nobody else is coming here, and we're gonna stay until the law passes.
Right.
It doesn't work like that.
All right. Well, we're going to continue talking about development as it relates to major projects for the government. Again, just a reminder that For the Record is brought to you by Champion House Restaurant 2 and Champion House Cafe, as well as the Auto Spa located on Godfrey Nixon Way. If you're just tuning in, we have the pleasure of having our Honorable Premier, Mr. Alden McLaughlin, in the studio with us this morning. Of course, you can give us a call here, toll free, courtesy of Lime at 1-800-534-8255 or 949-8037 with your questions or even your comments for our Premier this morning. So, Mr. McLaughlin, we talked about cruise development. Let's touch a bit on the project that is actually about to, take off, and that's the airport renovations, extensions, so on and so forth.
Yes, I think anyone who's been going in and out of the airport would have noticed the changes that are happening there. What you're seeing now really are mostly interim measures as we try to get the facility into better shape, create greater capacity to deal with the increased number of air arrivals that we're having.
Right.
And this is good news that we've got these new arrivals, but it does put a greater stress on a facility that was designed for half the number of visitors that we're actually receiving now. So we're seeing the improvements in the I call them that, the walkways, so that people who are waiting outside actually get some shelter from the sun and if the weather is inclement from the rain. But in addition to that, they're installing a new departure lounge. It's one of these temporary structures.
Okay.
But it's amazing what they do these days. It comes complete with restroom facilities and air conditioning and all of that. But it's a temporary structure.
Right.
Because we want to be able to improve the experience there as we head into the high season again. But the major work on the airport will start sometime in the first quarter of next year as we move to expand the airport on a permanent basis, which is going to include improving the airstrip as well and strengthening that, and looking at lengthening it and and putting in a parallel taxiway because of the traffic that we have. So that's going to be another major project that's going to be on the way quite early next year. In the interim, I mean, some of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to improve the experience for visitors as they come in, the business visitors in particular,
Right.
and to offer them as a pilot project that we're starting. We hope to soon be able to offer them essentially concierge services so that they can get the VIP treatment. They're going to pay for it,
Of course.
over and above, you know, and a fast track through customs and immigration, and access to the VIP lounge and so forth.
Right.
Because the whole objective is to try to make Cayman, you know, more attractive. People want to come here, because the whole overall experience is that much better than it is somewhere else. And you know, as a sort of adjunct to that, what we've done is we have amended immigration regulations so that business visitors don't need a work permit if they come here for less than up to 10 days.
Right.
You know, because we've had some really bad experiences, you know, with some sort of confusion, immigration officers not knowing quite what they should do, because this individual is coming and they say they're coming to look at files, to have meetings and so forth, whether they need a work permit, whether they don't need a work permit. So we've made that clear now, and if you're coming on business for up to 10 days, you just get a stamp and you're in.
Okay.
Those people are not taking any Caymanian jobs. They're not threatening any Caymanian jobs. We want them to come. We want more of them to come. Look at what the operations are like in Cayman. Eat at our restaurants, stay in a hotel, go to Stingray City, you know, rent a car, you know, all that's good.
Right.
And to go back as ambassadors for Cayman, saying, you know, Cayman's a great place to go. And so, I mean, we're already in the Caribbean, sea and sand and sun and great people and rhythms and good food and all of that. They know that, and when they're living in, you know, in Washington D.C. or in London, you know, the Cayman Islands is a exotic place for people to come to. So, you know, let's attract more of them, and let's not be so insular and difficult about having people come to visit. They're not threatening Caymanian jobs. They're coming here for less than 10 days. You know,
Yeah.
let's make the experience for them good. So it's that kind of approach that the government is taking to these things to get more people here.
Right. And hopefully they'll fly our national airline, Cayman Airways, when they come in here. And mentioned in Cayman Airways, they've gotten a rave review from a travel critic recently, which is placed us on the top 8 of best airlines in the world, which is a testament to hard work and the family unit that they have over at our national airline. Also, they've enhanced the services to Cayman Brac to be able to accommodate larger loads of passengers going over. So that's great news as well.
Right. The plane that we've just got in is an interim measure. We're getting what I would like to think is an even better plane on a permanent basis. But yeah, I mean, it's very important that we make Cayman Brac easy to get to and attractive to get to. And a lot of people have issues with the really small planes. Not me, I don't mind. I think I think the small planes are safer, and I'm quite comfortable getting on the one that we had and going to the Brac, no problem at all. But it's not me. You're catering for the tourists, and I mean, one of the objectives, sort of longer term, is to have direct flights from Miami, Tampa, wherever, to Cayman Brac, so that people don't have to do land in Cayman, stop, and then go there, because we really do need to do everything we possibly can to create, improve the economic conditions in Cayman Brac, and tourism is a key factor. The more tourists we can get there, the better.
Right. Let's talk about what you said to the Chamber membership, as it was, about the employment issues in Cayman and what they could do to make a difference. What your hopes of your administration and yourself are in this partnership with the Chamber, as its membership is so large, so diverse, and so impactful. What did you say to them as it related to?
Well, I've dealt with some of it already. I think early in the morning, when I talked to them about my hope that they will encourage their membership to be better employers, to give Caymanians a greater chance in training opportunities and so forth, and particularly about this issue with these redundancies. But I also spoke to them about, they're calling for more rehabilitation to be done with respect to persons who have been to jail and so forth. And I explained to them that, there are already on the way a significant number of rehabilitation measures that the government is taking. But what we do need is that when prisoners have been rehabilitated, that the workplace becomes more welcoming to them, that employers are willing to take a chance, if I may say that, on someone who has gone through a program and who has demonstrated that they have a completely different view about life. If no one hires them, if no one gives them a chance, what are their options?
Exactly.
And I'm delighted to say that what I said didn't fall on deaf ears, it appears, because already I was since then the chamber has met with Neil Levis, who's the director of prison, to talk about some of these issues. I saw him night before last, and I was at the governor's the civil service awards thing, and I was delighted that he told me that the chamber had contacted him and they'd already met. And I said, well, sometimes you say these things and you wonder whether it makes any impact at all, but at least in this case, someone was listening.
Right.
So I'm very hopeful that a proper partnership can be developed there, and that we can find more of our people who have been through the prison system having a second chance at life and making good.
And we should speak to the action of the owners of Health City Cayman when that project was being constructed. The local owner or local partner, Mr. Gene Thompson, was adamant about giving people second chances and was able to employ a good number of Caymanian men to actually who had been through the system in some way or another, whether it would have been minute or on a major basis, and successfully was able to do that. So it's possible.
And to bring in the project on time and on the budget.
Yes.
So
So
it worked.
We Caymanians are known for being great contractors anyway, and construction workers. We're very good with our hands. So let's talk a little bit about crime. This seems to be going in spikes. In your speech, you laid out the fact that crime overall was down. Some crimes are up according to statistics, and some are down.
Crime is up. But at the time I did the speech, it was up 40% over the previous year, which is
right.
really, really worrying. And we're seeing a spike now with. I think this week we must have had three or four robberies. There was one again last night, which is very, very worrying. I've spoken to the Commissioner of Police as recently as this morning, actually, and they have increased patrols along the 7 Mile Beach because, robbery, in the tourist area in particular has hugely damaging consequences. Cayman was known for years and years as being an incredibly safe place to be, and the sort of robberies along there are a major worry. The truth is, though, that there is a small number of people who are perpetrating these crimes. We've seen this time and time again, and until the police actually nail those, what we're seeing now is going to continue. The police obviously have ideas about who these people are, but until they actually round them up, I'm afraid this is likely to continue because, as you say, these things go in spades. But it's not as though there are a huge number of armed robbers all over the place,
right,
doing these things. It's a small group of people, and by and large, they're generally known to the police. But knowing that it is that knowing these people and actually having the evidence to take them in is another matter, and that's
Right.
what they got to concentrate on. So, as I said, they increased patrols along 7 Mile Beach, getting the special constabulary to assist as well, so that there are greater numbers of officers available, and they're working at it. I'm hoping that we can get the commissioner of police to come and brief cabinet on Tuesday as
Okay.
well, so that all members know exactly where things are. But as I say, I speak to him on a regular basis, and I spoke to him this morning before I came here, with respect to the most recent robbery. But they're working, and everybody is concerned about this issue. It is one of the unfortunate things in Cayman's progress. You know, years ago, 6, 8 years ago, armed robbery was a fairly rare thing in Cayman. But you remember back in, I think it was 2010, 2011, 2011, when we had this huge rash
Yes.
of a very, very serious robberies that went on for a while, until the police we actually had to bring in people from the UK and so forth, until they actually nailed those guys,
Right.
and then things
Calm down.
calmed down again. Now we're seeing it start to ramp up again.
Well, hopefully it's just a couple of one-offs, because, like you said, it can be very impactful and detrimental to our tourist industry once it goes there. I mean, it's bad enough when our own people and those who have come to make Cayman their home are affected in this way. But when it starts to hit an entire industry, it can be quite detrimental. But on to some good news. The Customs Department is making headlines all over the place these days in a very, very good way. We're hearing more. I'm sure they've been doing this all along, but we're hearing more now about their enforcement arm of the Customs Department. What do you have to say to those guys over there, and what they're doing as far as border patrol being able to make many arrests in and out of our airports recently?
No, I think they're doing a great job, and I think in large part it is because we now have an identified head at customs. I mean, for a number of years, there really was, we didn't have a collector of customs, because the post was vacant. But with Samantha Bennett in there now, and she's really taken things seriously and is working very hard. And of course, you have Marlon Bawden there as her deputy, which is, with all of his experience in law enforcement before, I think they make a very good team. And customs now has direction and determination about what to do, what they're doing, and I think it's making all the difference, and we can see.
Okay. The EY report.
The EY report.
The Ernst &
Some
Young
love
report.
it, some hate it.
Yes, the much talked about report. I mean, you've made it clear, and you made it clear in your State of the Nation speech as well. Let's go through it bit by bit from the beginning. They were taken on as a company who won the bid to discuss and look at ways
to
rationalize the civil service. Right. So let's continue from there.
Yeah, as I explained on another show, I think this week, this really arose because of concerns which I expressed both privately and publicly after I took office about overall government expenditure and the measures that had been taken to get expenditure back under control. My view then, my view now is that most of those measures are really unsustainable in the long term, because they are really based on reducing headcount in the public service, and therefore liability for salaries and pensions and health care and all of those things. But the demand for government services continues to grow, and government can't provide those additional services without additional people. And the containment of the expenditure has been in large part because in many instances government has not filled key posts in immigration, in customs, in the police, in the fire service, in the prison service, right across the spectrum. I name those because those are sort of the frontline services which people see and feel right up front. And many of those posts now need to be filled. I mean, in terms of the fire service, they're down like 47 um, officers from the high point that they had. Immigration issues to the police, and the choice is simply this: either we provide substandard service in the areas that we have, or we fill the posts. If we fill the posts, expenditure goes up. We can't have it both ways. So the rationalization exercise, which was the idea of the deputy governor, which I and the government support, is for this to be sustainable in the long term, government has got to look at what areas it needs to stay or continue doing, and areas which can be better done, more efficiently done, services which can be more efficiently, effectively provided by the private sector, ought to be provided by the private sector. That is, if the private sector are prepared to do them, because the private sector are not going to provide any services unless there is a profit in it, and that's a reality that we have to deal with. So the purpose of this rationalization exercise is to look at how government can more efficiently and effectively provide key services which it needs to do to the public at a cheaper cost. We need to find a way to contain the growth of the numbers in the public service and reduce government's overall footprint. Easier said.
I'm going to ask you to stick a pin there, Premier, for us. We're going to have to go to our news at this point. We'll be back with Premier Alden McLaughlin in just a few minutes. Stay with us. And welcome back, Cayman. If you're just joining us, I'm Donna Bush in for Mr. Orrit Connor this morning, this Friday, beautiful Friday morning in the Cayman Islands. Just a reminder that For the Record is brought to you by Champion House Restaurant 2 and Champion House Cafe, as well as the Auto Spa. And again, if you're just tuning in, we have our Honorable Premier, Mr. Alden McLaughlin, in our studio this morning. He is here talking to us about his State of the Nation speech that he gave recently at the Chamber annual legislative luncheon held just last week. Before we went to the break, our premier was discussing the interesting and controversial EY rationalization report. So let's continue talking a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I was explaining the basis for it, that government just can't keep growing, because when it grows, it costs the country more and more and more and more, and it becomes unaffordable. And it's not just the salaries, it's the healthcare and the pension benefits and all of the other things that go along with, working for government. So what we are seeking to do is to find ways to reduce, or to restrain as far as possible the continued growth of the public service, which means, as I said, government has got to get out of some of the businesses that is currently involved with, because if you're in there, if you're doing that type of business, whatever it is, the demands for you to do more of it are going to continue to grow as the country continues to grow. And so if government is to reduce its footprint, or at least not make it get any bigger, it's going to have to find areas that it can hive off to the private sector. So that's what the exercise is really all about. And of course, that causes fears within the public service. People wonder if their job is going to be cut, or whatever the case is going to be. And so government has this balancing exercise to do. And as I say, on one end, people worry about their jobs. On the other end, you get the other camp banging on about the government is not going to be brave enough to make the hard decisions that it needs to make. Well, we are, but we are not going to be insensitive, and I've said that before, and we can't be insensitive to the social consequences of cuts. We are certainly not going to take measures which are going to result in significant numbers of civil servants being without jobs, particularly in the current environment where we already have issues with unemployment. I mean, that would be absolutely idiotic. And so the measures that the government is not going to do anything rash. Any measures that we adopt with respect to reducing the overall size of the public service and the businesses that government is currently involved in will be done in a careful, thoughtful, considerate way. and so that people can plan, and we don't wind up with people out of jobs as a result of this exercise. There are other aspects of it which we've already gotten the ire of certain parts of the community, certain camps, if I call them that, because we have taken a policy decision that we are not going to dispose of key government assets. We can't see the sense of it. If government were in a cash crunch, where we couldn't pay bills, where we were desperate for money to do various things with, I could see
Right.
why we would sell the government administration building and then lease it back, because government would get a big whop of money up front to do whatever it critically needed to do. But we are not in that place.
Right.
Our finances are not where we would like them to be, and we're still under pressure to contain expenditure and grow revenue. And our debt burden is perhaps still bigger than we would like. But we are not in a cash crunch. Government is quite capable. We're looking at $121 million surplus at the end of this year if all goes according to plan. While we don't have that money available to us to just do what we like with, it is available there for us to do things like pay down government debt and the various things that we need to do.
Right.
So government is not in a cash crunch, and we just can't see the good sense of selling the building, which cost $110 million, selling it for $90 million, and leasing it back and paying lease payments ad infinitum. So, and there are some who disagree with us about that, and so be it. It's like Radio Cayman. Some say, oh well, there are 13 radio stations in Cayman. Why is Radio Cayman competing with the private enterprise? Well, I don't see it that way at all. Radio Cayman exists to be able to do things like we're doing today. Radio Cayman exists because it is the means by which Caymanians have gotten the real news for 40 plus years. It is a Caymanian institution. It is critical, I believe, that any government has the means by which it can accurately get its message out to the listening public.
Take Hurricane Ivan, for instance. I mean, without Radio Cayman, where would the listening public have been as far as getting information?
Exactly. So, we've taken those kinds of decisions, and not everybody's happy about that. But that really is the government's job. It is the job of the experts who wrote the report to make their recommendations, and they've done a good job, and we thank them for it, and they've been very careful and comprehensive in their coverage. But it is the constitutional responsibility of the cabinet to take the decisions, to decide what recommendations we accept, which we think ought to be modified, and which we don't accept.
Right.
And for some to suggest, as I've seen them, is that we should just take the report. This is what EY says, and implement it. Well, I'm afraid EY were not elected. We were elected. We're the ones who have that responsibility. We're the ones who the voters will hold accountable.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. We're working through the report. They have some very good recommendations, particularly with respect to the amalgamation of some government agencies. That if you put these two together, you can get better service at lower cost. You don't need quite all of these people. You don't need all of the space, that sort of thing.
Right.
And the government is looking very carefully at all of that. As I said at the chamber when I delivered the speech, there are some areas where their recommendations overlap or come very close to what government has already decided to do.
Okay.
And that gives us a considerable amount of confidence that we're going about these things in the right way.
Okay.
These include the airport renovation, the adoption of the private public partnership process for the cruise terminal, raising the retirement age of civil servants to 65, development of the integrated solid waste management system, simplifying the budgetary and financial reporting. Those are all steps that the government is already taking, which they have recommended that we go down those roads. So I think the report is useful, very helpful to government. We're certainly not going to kick it to the curb, but at the same time, we're not going to adopt it wholesale.
Right. All right. We have a caller on the line. Thank you for calling For the Record here on Radio Cayman. Do you have a question or a comment for our premier this morning?
Good morning, this is Dolan, out from the Brack.
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Dolan.
How are you? How's the weather on the Brack?
Oh, the sun is shining to the south and some clouds to the north.
Okay.
All right.
In other words, we're between.
All right.
Alden,
Yes, sir.
I want to say two things to you, and you can hate me for life or what. Don't you ever touch Radio Cayman.
Did you hear what I said just now?
I was listening to you, but I just had to rub it into you, too.
Okay.
You were rubbing it into me.
All right.
Don't
right.
you ever get rid of that station.
It doesn't sound like he plans to, sir. And we thank you for.
No. That's the first one. The second one is this. I want to ask him a question. If all of you are so big to be the government to run the island, why do you need someone else to come and tell you what to do, how to do it, what to sell, what not to sell? All of you should be there to know those things on yourself. All of you and your ministers.
Well, not everybody is an expert in everything. So what you do is you get the experts to look at these things, make recommendations, but it is the job of the government to make the decisions. But you want to make sure when you're making the decisions that you've gotten the best advice you possibly can.
The best advice you can get is for all of you to sit down and discuss the whole thing, all 18 of you. And the last thing is this. Lead the Speaker of the House different. Make sure next election, Kim and Brad get the second person, sir. Not being rude to you. I'm just passing on how I feel.
Explain that to me again, what you say?
The next election, leave the Speaker of the House how she is, and make Kim and Brad get a second person representative in the House.
Okay, I'll talk to Mose about it.
Oh, God, they'll go through one ear, fly through the foot.
Thank you for your call.
Keep it up.
Okay, take care.
Always good to hear from number one.
Absolutely. So we're continuing to talk about the State of the Nation speech presented by our Honorable Premier, Mr. Alden McLaughlin, recently at the Chamber annual legislative luncheon. Let's get back to some of the projects and some of the things, initiatives that your administration and yourself, Premier McLaughlin, is moving forward with. One of them is Georgetown revitalization. When you go through Georgetown at night, it's things are not happening. It's not alive, and this has been talked about for a while. And your government intends to move forward with helping the merchants in the area and business owners in the area to boost business and have that as a place, a destination for our visitors and locals alike to go to. Let's touch on that.
Yeah, well, I think these two things are tied together: the development of the pier, the cruise berthing pier, and the revitalization of Georgetown. So we have to take into account in whatever it is that we're going to do to improve the central business district, the reality that when the pier is built, you're going to have many thousands of people coming off into this area, and how you say this word? Pedestrian
friendly?
Yeah, pedestrianizing. That was trying to find
Right.
the word. Pedestrianizing Georgetown is going to mean that you have to find alternate routes for the traffic, for the vehicular traffic, and so a big part of the exercise is planning new roads in and out of the central business district. So we've gotten all of that done in terms of the planning for it and the gazettal and so forth. And starting next year, it'll probably be by the first quarter of next year, work will begin on new connector roads, which will run from Elgin Avenue to Eastern Avenue, from Elgin Avenue to Smith Road, from the Godfrey Nixon Way extension to North Church Street, and the extension of 4th Street going north. And we're also planning improvements to Smith Road, Godfrey Nixon Way, Edward Street, and 4th Street in Georgetown. So those are probably going to be some of the first things that people are going to actually see with the revitalization project.
Okay.
We are bringing new legislation to the House to amend the development and planning laws so that buildings in Georgetown can have apartments and so forth, residential apartments and so forth, as part of their use. Um, that's the way it is in most cities. People can have penthouses and so forth on top of what is an office building, and so if we get more residents in central Georgetown, that is obviously going to improve the economic situation with restaurants and bars and other entertainment areas, so that Georgetown ceases to be the sort of dormitory. Well, I shouldn't say it's a dormitory; it's dead really.
Yeah.
At night, because there's really little economic activity, a little commercial activity. Once 6:30, 7 o'clock at night comes, you got a few of the bars and restaurants on the waterfront that still operate, but the central business district itself goes to sleep.
Right. And just to give listeners out there who may not know exactly an idea, a visual idea of what you're talking about as far as residences is concerned, this happens in many islands and throughout the world where, apartments or lofts are actually constructed or existing businesses actually turn their top floors into apartments that are then leased out or rented to tenants. Onto another subject, though, as it relates to the Georgetown revitalization. Has government ever considered, parking is a huge issue in downtown Georgetown, has government ever considered maybe turning the old Tower Building site into a leased parking area for downtown Georgetown and lease it out to businesses?
Well, many ideas have been tossed around with respect to what we do with our property. But for the interim, the reason why we really aren't doing much with it now is because it will need to be used as a staging area for the development of the new piers.
Okay.
And so we don't want to do anything permanent with it until all of that is sorted out. Right now, things are very, very fluid. The actual plans haven't been developed for the pier, but we do know that we will need a big area, what's called a staging area, for the construction of the piers, to store a whole lot of stuff. And so I think for the next couple of years, it's probably going to stay fallow, if I may use that expression, there until the piers are actually built and we have a better idea of the best possible use for that property.
Let's talk about solid waste management. I know you recently you went to a site, I believe, in Tampa, Florida.
Well, a number of them actually.
Right. And then we can talk a little bit about the landfill, which continues to be an ongoing subject as well. So tell us about solid waste management and what your take is on it after visiting those sites and what can be good for Cayman.
Well, the sites that we actually visited were waste-to-energy sites, where just about everything was incinerated and used to generate significant amount of electricity. And one of the big questions that was in my mind was whether or not Cayman generated sufficient waste to be able to make such a project viable. The view of the people there, I mean, when we explained to them, Cayman and how much waste we produce and so forth, is that it is that they do make these systems, on a much smaller scale than what we saw operating in. We visited 4 of them in the Tampa area. But what's going on now and what's caused some controversies, and of course everybody's anxious that we get on and we do it. Many people have said, well, you've had all of these studies done, why don't you just use one of them? The reality is that most of those studies are out of date. The technology has moved on significantly. And while it's taking more time, I think we've adopted the minister has adopted the right approach, which is to say what we need is a national waste management strategy. Waste to energy is only one component of the overall strategy, and so we're moving ahead on that basis. And they've now got a project manager hired. The work on the strategy is beginning, and it's going to take some. This is not something that's going to be an overnight fix, but I believe that by 2016, the country will have a clear idea what we're going to have as a national waste management approach. In the meantime, we're working to improve the operations at the landfill to prevent, the issues with fires and so forth that have occurred in the recent past from occurring again. Essentially, that comes down to better management of the facility.
Okay.
And part of the problem was, and still is, that we didn't and still don't have all the equipment that we need to properly manage the facility. And the minister is working hard to get all of those issues sorted. The thing is, you just don't snap your finger like that and find the kind of equipment that you need. Often you got to wait when you order the stuff and so forth. But I'm content that everything that can be done is being done, and that we're moving in the right direction with respect to a long-term solution to Cayman's waste issues.
Okay.
You've got to come up with a plan that is good for 20, 30 or more years. This is not something that Cayman that you can just fix and walk away from. Cayman is going to continue to grow, and therefore the amount of waste we produce is going to continue to grow. And so you got to have a waste management plan and a strategy that takes all of that into account.
Okay.
Otherwise, it'll be obsolete before it actually starts working.
All right. Well, we're going to be wrapping up our few minutes, our 2-hour discussion here on For the Record in just a few minutes. Right now, we're going to go and take a quick break. Back. I'm Donna Bush in for Mr. Orrit Connor this morning, and thank you again for joining us on For the Record. We have a few minutes to wrap up with our Premier, the Honourable Alden McLaughlin. So we're going to touch quickly on two things that have been brought up recently and discussed and decided upon by the Premier and his administration. One is daylight savings time. What is the government's position on daylight savings time?
Well, we want to have a consultation. We want to have a national discussion about this, because we really do believe that there are some benefits to be achieved from going to daylight savings time. If we get Cayman in tune, in sync with New York, it's a huge advantage from the business standpoint, particularly the financial services sector I'm speaking about. But it also will mean that cruise ships essentially will stay here an hour longer at the moment, because we'll be in sync with their time, and it'll make things easier for all of us when we're traveling and so forth, because we'll be on the same time with Miami and New York,
right,
when their time changes. So we think there are some advantages in it, but the government is not bound and determined to do it. We're going to deal with this as we did with Sunday trading. Have a consultation process, get the feedback, analyze it, and try to assess where we think the majority of people in the country would like things to be. With Sunday trading, we got the clear message that even from the business community, that Cayman still wanted to keep one day where people could rest and relax, most people anyhow, because some people have to work, and not turn it into a general trading day. So what we've done there is what we're going to do is to move to make sure that businesses that people have become used to, the corner stores, mom and pop shops, the C-stores at the gas stations, that they are legal in selling what they sell,
right,
but not extend the scope for general trading beyond that. And all the feedback I've gotten is that most people think we've taken the right decision in that regard. I hope we can be as successful with our dealing with daylight saving time.
And it was done rather quickly, if I might add, which shows that things can move forward quickly without a lot of red tape and
well, let me tell you
bureaucracy.
something. I tell people I'd rather be cursed for the things I did than the things I didn't do, and I'm not one who's afraid to make decisions about things. You reach a point where you need to make a decision.
Right.
And then whatever the consequences are, but you made the decision.
Right. Premier McLaughlin, we have one final call. I believe Ms. Daphne is back on the line. So we're going to take that call, and then we're going to call it a wrap here on For the Record. Ms. Daphne, you're there?
Good morning again, and thank you for taking my call.
No
just
worries.
to say that in listening to the address from the president of the Chamber of Commerce the other day, I tried to get as much from his speech as I possibly could. But I will say this, that the Chamber of Commerce, the members of the Chamber I'm sure, are fully aware that it isn't just government who needs to ensure that Caymanians are employed, Caymanians are given a fair shot at being able to, get the jobs that are available in Cayman. The chamber, the members of the chamber are those who do a lot of the hiring. It isn't just government. Government has their role to play. But equally as important, I think it's that every single member of the chamber needs to understand that they have to work hand in hand with the government if we're going to see this particular problem solved, or some headway made in seeing the numbers both of Caymanians who are hired and placed in positions that are now being held by expatriates. We will always need expatriates. We have always been very kind and welcoming to them, but obviously one looks after his own house first. So I would implore upon the chamber, the members of the chamber, to say, listen, this is a joint effort here. And it isn't just on government to solve the employment problem in Cayman. That has to be something which the chamber addresses equally, as urgently, and as seriously as does the members of government at this time and those who work with them. So basically, that's what I wanted to say. And again, thank you very much for the show this morning.
Thanks for the call back, Ms.
Thank
Daphne.
you.
All right, well, that's it for us here on For the Record. Again, we want to thank our Honorable Premier, Mr. Alden McLaughlin, for being here with us this morning on For the Record. Again, the show was brought to you by Champion House 2 Restaurant, as well as Champion House Cafe and the Auto Spa. I'm Donna Bush. Thanks again for joining us, and I wish you a wonderful weekend.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers. For the record. For the record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Arit Connor.